It's late. The lights are off. And yet, you're still awake, aren't you? Something in the dark keeps your eyes open. A sound, a whisper, a thought that won't let go. Welcome to Midnight Hunt, where every story is a shadow and every shadow hides a story. Tonight's tale is about a boy who learned that sometimes the things we fear under our bed aren't just in our imagination. They're waiting, listening, whispering. This is The Whispers Under My Bed. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, don't look under. I used to think fear was something that lived in stories. The kind that hides in the dark corners of fairy tales or in those old horror movies my brother and I used to sneak, watch when our parents fell asleep. I never thought fear could live under my bed. My name's Emily. I was 16 the summer it began. An ordinary girl in an ordinary house on Willow Lane, a quiet suburban street with trimmed lawns, nosy neighbors, and dogs that barked at everything. Our house was nothing special, but I loved it. My parents had worked for years to buy it. 3 bedrooms, white walls, a creaky staircase, and a backyard where my younger brother Jake and I used to build forts out of cardboard boxes. That summer, Dad worked night shifts at the hospital, so most evenings it was just me, Jake, and Mom. She'd cook dinner while we watched TV. Then we'd head upstairs by 9. I'd scroll on my phone, do homework, and fall asleep to the low hum of the ceiling fan. Everything felt normal until the first whisper. It was a Thursday night. I remember because I had an exam the next day, and I was staying up late to cram. The house was silent except for the ticking of the hallway clock and the faint rustle of trees outside. I was sitting on my bed, highlighter in hand, when I heard it. Something like a soft breath, a faint word. Emily, I froze. The sound was so quiet, I wasn't sure if I imagined it. Maybe the wind. Maybe Jake playing a prank. I got off the bed and peeked out the door. His room was dark, the door shut. Mom's light was off too. Everything was still. I laughed at myself, shook my head, and went back to studying. But that night, as I turned off the light and slid under my blanket, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was awake with me. The silence felt heavy, like the air itself was listening. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was already spilling through my curtains. Nothing looked strange, except my blanket was halfway on the floor. I was sure I'd fallen asleep tucked in. Small thing, right? Maybe I'd moved in my sleep. Still, it left me uneasy. That day went on as usual, school, chatter, gossip, the endless scroll of teenage life. But that night, when I got into bed again, I made sure to check under it. Nothing. Just boxes, shoes, and dust. I turned off the light. Emily. The whisper came again. Clear this time. I shot up, heart pounding. Jake, cut it out. I hissed into the dark. No answer. Just the software of the ceiling fan. I got down on my knees, lifted the bed sheet, and looked underneath. Empty, the shadows shifted slightly, but there was no one there. I held my breath, waiting for something to move. Nothing. I slept with my lamp on that night. Over the next few days, little things started happening. My alarm would go off at random hours. My bedroom door would creak open in the middle of the night, even though I swore I'd closed it. Once, I heard the faint scratching sound from under the floorboards, like nails dragging slowly on wood. I told Mom about it one morning while she was pouring coffee. Probably just the pipes. Honey, she said without looking up, houses make noises at night. Yeah, Jake snorted from across the table. Maybe it's your monster under the bed. He laughed. I didn't. That night, I put in my earbuds hoping music would drown out any sound. It worked for a while. Until the power went out, I woke up to total darkness. My phone screen was dead, my lamp off. Even the hum of the ceiling fan was gone. I sat up, heart hammering. Then I heard it again, closer this time. Emily, why are you awake? I couldn't move. The voice was whispery, almost childlike. It came from directly under the bed. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I slowly reached for the edge of the mattress and leaned forward, peering down. Nothing. Just darkness. But as I sat there frozen, something cold brushed against my ankle. I jerked my leg back and scrambled for the light switch. When the power flickered on a moment later, everything looked normal again. My room was empty. My bed was still. Except the edge of my blanket was tucked under the frame, like someone had pulled it down from below. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was a dream. Sleep paralysis, maybe. Stress. That's what people say when they don't have an explanation. But deep down, I knew what I felt was real. And whatever was under my bed, it knew my name. After that night, I couldn't sleep properly for days. Every creak, every whisper of wind against the window made my skin crawl. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination, that maybe I'd been half asleep and dreamed it. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Mom noticed the dark circles under my eyes at breakfast. "You need to sleep, sweetheart," she said, reaching to touch my hand. "You're stressing yourself out?" "I know," I muttered. "It's just noises. I keep hearing things." Jake smirked from behind his cereal bowl. "Maybe it's a ghost who's tired of your music." "Nuff, Jake," Mom said, but she was smiling too. No one took it seriously. Not even me. At least not during the day. But when the sun went down, the comfort of normal life faded with it. That Friday night, I decided to stay up late again, partly because I was scared to sleep. The house was quiet. Mom had gone to bed early, and Jake was at a friend's place. I sat on my bed scrolling through my phone, the blue light flickering across the walls. Then I heard the scratching again. It started softly, like something lightly dragging against the floorboards beneath my bed. I froze listening. It came in slow, uneven strokes. Scratch, pause, scratch, scratch. I held my breath and leaned over the edge of the bed. The sound stopped instantly. My room fell silent, heavy and waiting. After a minute, I reached for my phone flashlight, leaned down, and aimed it underneath, empty. But as soon as I pulled my head back up, my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. No caller ID, 12:41 a.m. My heart thudded. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" Nothing, just static. Then, so faint it almost blended with the hiss, I heard it again. "Emily." I dropped the phone, my breath catching in my throat. It clattered onto the floor, the screen lighting up the edge of the bed frame. That was enough. I ran out of my room and straight into Mom's. She sat up, startled. "Mom, I heard it again," I said, shaking. "It was under my bed, I swear." She blinked, disoriented. "Honey, calm down. You probably had a nightmare." "No, I was awake!" It said my name. On the phone. Mom sighed. The kind of sigh that means she's already decided you're being silly. "Maybe someone's prank calling you. Don't answer unknown numbers, okay?" I wanted to argue, but what was the point? She wouldn't believe me. No one would. The next day, I tried to forget about it. I went out with friends, stayed in bright places full of noise and laughter. But that night, dread crept back in as soon as I stepped into my room. I left the hallway light on and played music quietly from my laptop. The soft glow made me feel safer. For a while, nothing happened. I even started to think maybe it really was in my head. Then, around 3 a.m., I woke up freezing. My blanket was gone, completely pulled off me. I sat up, teeth chattering, and saw it bunched up on the floor, halfway under the bed. A slow, cold fear crawled up my spine. I slid off the mattress and crouched down. My hand shook as I reached for the blanket. I tugged gently. Something tugged back. I screamed and stumbled backward, hitting the wall. The blanket slipped out and fell limp again, motionless. The noise must have woken Mom because a moment later she was at the door. "Emily, what happened?" Something pulled it," I gasped. "My blanket. Look." She turned on the main light. The room looked completely normal. No sound, no movement. She said softly. "You're scaring yourself. There's nothing here." She checked under the bed herself, even lifted the blanket. "Nothing." "See," she said. "Just dust and shoes. Try to get some rest." But as she walked out, I saw something she didn't. Tiny marks on the wooden floor. Thin, parallel scratches leading from under my bed toward the wall. I didn't mention them. I couldn't. Over the next few days, the feeling of being watched never left. Even in daylight, I'd catch myself glancing at shadows, expecting to see something move. At night, it got worse. The whispers became more frequent. Faint voices speaking just below hearing level. Sometimes it was my name. Other times, I couldn't tell what they said. Once, as I lay there frozen, I whispered, "Who are you?" For a moment, there was silence. Then, so softly I almost didn't hear it. You know me, I pressed my hands over my ears and stayed that way until morning. When I told Mom again, she frowned. "Maybe we should take you to a doctor, honey. You haven't been sleeping. Stress can make you hear things." Jakey chimed in with a laugh. "Or maybe she's haunted." Mom shot him a look, but I could see it, the uncertainty in her eyes. She was starting to wonder too. That night I made a decision. I placed my phone on video mode and set it on the floor beside my bed, camera facing the gap underneath. If something was there, I'd catch it. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined something crawling out. When morning finally came, I snatched up my phone, hands trembling. The video was 2 hours long. Most of it showed nothing but darkness. But near the end, around 3:12 a.m., something moved. A pale hand, thin, wrong, almost skeletal, reached out from the shadows under my bed and slowly dragged my blanket down. Then it disappeared. I didn't tell anyone about the video for 2 days. Not because I didn't want to, because I couldn't. Every time I opened my phone to show someone, my stomach twisted, like something inside me whispered, "Don't." I kept replaying it in my head. That hand? That awful pale hand sliding from beneath my bed. I could almost feel it again, cold and weightless against my skin. But when I checked the video again on the third day, it was gone. The file was still there, but when I tapped it, the screen turned black. No sound, no image. Just darkness until the clip ended. My throat went dry. I hadn't deleted it. I hadn't touched it. Yet it was like the thing under my bed had reached into my phone and erased itself. That night, I locked my door and piled boxes and books in front of the gap under my bed. I pushed a heavy suitcase there too, just to make sure nothing could crawl out. Then I sat at my desk, headphones in, pretending to study while my eyes kept darting toward that space. Around 2 a.m., I started to hear tapping. Slow, deliberate taps coming from inside the mattress. Tap, 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 tap. I yanked off my headphones, staring at the bed. The sound stopped. I leaned closer, heart pounding so hard I could hear my pulse in my ears. After a few seconds of silence, I whispered, "Stop it." Something tapped back. 3 times. I jumped so hard my chair toppled. The noise woke Jake, who came stumbling into my room, rubbing his eyes. What the hell?" "It's 3 in the morning. There's something in my room," I said. "Listen." He groaned. "Not this again. Just listen." We both stood still. The room went silent. Then, tap, tap, tap. Jake frowned. "Okay, that's weird." He walked over to my bed, crouched down, and pulled away one of the boxes. "It's probably a mouse or something." "Jake, don't." He ignored me, leaning down to look. I held my breath. "See," he said, half laughing. "Nothing but." He froze. His smile vanished. "What?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He just stared into the darkness under the bed, his face slowly draining of color. "Jakey." Suddenly, he jerked backward so fast he hit his head on the bed frame. "Something's in there," he shouted. We both bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind us. Mom came running from her room, panic in her voice. "What's going on?" Jake stammered. "There's something under her bed, Mom. I saw it." Mom looked between us, exhausted and confused. "Oh, for God's sake. Both of you? Enough with this nonsense." But when she saw the look on Jake's face, her expression softened. Still, she went into my room anyway, holding a flashlight. I wanted to stop her, but she was already pushing the door open. She crouched down, shining the light under the bed. "See nothing." I stepped closer. The boxes were back where I'd left them. Nothing looked disturbed. Jake's eyes were wide, his voice shaking. I swear I saw something. A face." Mom sighed, putting the flashlight down. "You two need sleep. That's all." But I saw her hand trembling when she turned off the light. That night, I refused to sleep in my room. I stayed on the couch in the living room with Jake. He didn't tease me anymore. We just lay there in silence, listening to the house creak. Around 3 a.m., something moved upstairs. It was faint like footsteps, slow, dragging steps, back and forth. Across my bedroom floor. Jake whispered, "You hear that?" I nodded, unable to speak. Then came the whisper, clear, distant, but unmistakable. "Emily." Jake's face went pale. What the hell was that? We both sat up, staring at the ceiling. The footsteps stopped. Then 3 loud bangs. Bang, bang. Mom came rushing out of her room in a panic. "What's going on?" Before we could answer, the lights flickered, once, twice, and went out completely. The house went silent. Then, from the hallway above us, we heard the faintest sound of laughter. Not a child's laugh. Not quite human either. A long, breathy, broken sound that echoed through the dark. Mom grabbed us both and whispered, "Stay here." She started up the stairs, flashlight in hand. The beam trembled as it moved across the walls. "Mom, don't," I cried. But she didn't stop. The light reached the top step, and then suddenly cut out. For a few seconds, there was nothing but silence. Then Mom's voice came shaky, small. "There's nothing here." But I could tell from her tone. She was lying. She came back down, locking eyes with me. "It's fine," she said quietly. "We'll call someone tomorrow. Maybe have the house checked." None of us slept that night. The next day, we called an exterminator. He searched everywhere, under the floors, behind the walls, even the attic. "No rodents," he said. "No signs of anything?" "House looks clean." But the smell lingered. A faint, sour, decaying odor that grew stronger near my bed. Mom sprayed air freshener. I burned candles. Nothing helped. That night, I dreamed of something crawling from under the bed. A pale figure with long black hair and hollow eyes whispering my name. When I woke up, I was crying. The next morning, I found muddy fingerprints on my bedsheet. Small ones. Like a child's hand. Except no one in our house had hands that small. That night was the one I'll never forget. The night everything finally came out from under the bed. By then, the air in my room felt different. Heavier. Thicker. Like something unseen was always breathing beside me. The faint smell of rot had crept into my pillows. Even the sunlight that spilled through the window in the morning looked dull. Grayish lifeless. Mom tried to stay calm, but she was scared too. I could see it in her eyes. Every time she walked past my door, she'd glance at the floor, like she expected something to grab her ankle. Jake refused to go upstairs anymore. He slept on the couch, saying he didn't care if he looked like a baby. I didn't blame him. I wanted to do the same, but I needed answers. That night, around midnight, I set up my phone again. I placed it on my nightstand, recording the whole room this time instead of just the floor. The red light blinked steadily as I lay back and tried to breathe normally. For a while, everything was quiet. Then, around 20:30 a.m., I heard it. The whisper. Emily. I opened my eyes slowly. My lamp was still on, but the light seemed dimmer somehow. The shadows stretched farther across the walls. The whisper came again. Closer. You shouldn't have looked at me. My chest tightened. My hands were shaking under the blanket. Who are you? I whispered. No answer. Just breathing. Long, raspy breathing from beneath the bed. Then something shifted underneath me. The entire mattress lifted slightly, as if something big had pushed against the underside. I screamed, bolting upright. The whisper turned into a low, trembling moan. The air in the room dropped in temperature so fast my breath fogged. Mom! I screamed again. Mom, help me! The door flew open. Mom rushed in, flashlight in hand, Jake behind her. What happened? But before I could answer, the light flickered violently. My lamp burst with a loud pop, plunging the room into darkness. Jake cursed. Mom's flashlight flickered too, the beam dancing wildly across the walls. And then, something crawled out. It happened so fast my brain almost refused to process it. A shape, thin, pale, twisted, slid from beneath the bed like a snake unfolding. I caught flashes of its limbs, long and jointed wrong, its fingers dragging against the wood, nails scraping. Mom screamed, stumbling backward. Jake shouted, What the? What is that? The thing's head turned toward me. I saw it clearly now. Hollow eyes, skin stretched too tight over its skull. Its mouth opened slowly, impossibly wide, and the voice that came out wasn't human. You saw me. It lunged. Mom grabbed my arm, yanking me toward the door. We all bolted out, slamming it behind us. I could hear it pounding from the other side, nails scratching the door, the voice shrieking my name again and again. Emile 1. Jake grabbed the phone and called 911, screaming into the receiver. Mom pulled me close, whispering, It's not real. It's not real. It can't be real. But her voice cracked halfway through. The banging stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a low groan came from the walls, followed by the sound of wood splintering. The house itself seemed to breathe like the walls were alive. I could hear footsteps upstairs, slow, deliberate pacing across my room. Then they moved to the hallway, right outside the door where we stood huddled together. Mom grabbed the baseball bat from the coat rack. Stay behind me, she whispered. The door handle rattled once, twice. Then, nothing. The air turned deathly cold. We all stood frozen. I could hear my heart beating in my throat. Then, without warning, every door in the hallway slammed shut at once. The sound was deafening. The lights flickered again, glowing dim red for just a second before dying out completely. Jake screamed. Mom tried to pull us toward the stairs, but something laughed. That same breathy, broken laugh we'd heard before. It echoed from upstairs, downstairs, everywhere, like it was inside the walls. I could barely breathe. Mom, what does it want? She didn't answer. She just whispered, Get out of the house. We ran for the front door. It wouldn't open. The lock turned, but the door wouldn't budge, as if someone was pushing it closed from the other side. Then the banging started again, this time from beneath the floor. The hardwood cracked in places, dust spilling out. Jake shouted, It's under us. Mom swung the bat at the wall, screaming for help, but the sound was drowned by that terrible voice again. Closer than ever. Don't leave me. Emily. I turned toward the staircase and froze. It was standing at the top of the stairs. The thing from under my bed. Its body bent in unnatural angles, head tilted, mouth still open in that hideous, stretched grin. Mum. I whispered. It started descending slowly, one jerky step at a time. The wooden stairs creaked with every movement. We backed away, inching toward the living room window. Jake picked up a chair and smashed it against the glass. It shattered. "Go," Mom shouted. Jake climbed out first, then Mom pushed me through. I tumbled onto the cold grass outside. She followed seconds later, dragging me to my feet. We ran barefoot across the lawn, not stopping until we reached the neighbor's porch. Mom pounded on the door until Mr. Harrison opened it, half asleep and confused. "Something's in our house!" Mom screamed. He blinked, then looked past us toward our house. The windows were dark, silent. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, they searched everything. Room by room, they found nothing. No sign of a break-in. No creature, not even the broken glass. It was as if the house had repaired itself. But one thing was still there, etched deep into the wood beneath my bed. 3 words scratched into the floorboards. "Stiadu Mimi." We didn't go back to the house that night. The police told us to stay with neighbors until morning, just in case. I remember sitting on the Harrisons' couch, wrapped in a blanket, my hands still trembling. Mom sat beside me silent, staring at nothing. Jake kept glancing out the window, as if he expected to see that thing standing in our yard. When dawn came, the sunlight felt strange. Too bright, almost mocking. The kind of light that pretends nothing happened in the dark. Around 9 a.m., the officers returned from another sweep of our home. "We didn't find anyone," one said. "Doors were locked from the inside. No sign of forced entry." Mom looked at him with hollow eyes. "Something was in there," she said quietly. The officer hesitated, pity flickering across his face. "Mayam, I don't doubt you were frightened. But sometimes under stress, the mind fills in blanks." I wanted to scream. But instead, I just nodded. There was no point. No one would believe what we saw. By afternoon, we packed a few bags and left to stay with my aunt 2 towns over. The drive was silent, the kind of silence that weighs heavy on your chest. The farther we got from Willow Lane, the lighter I felt, until night came again. That's when I realized it hadn't stayed behind. The first night at my aunt's, I couldn't sleep. The guest room felt unfamiliar. The walls too clean, the bed too soft. But at least it wasn't that room. I left the lamp on, curled under the blanket, and tried to convince myself it was over. Then, just as I started drifting off, I heard it. "Emily." I bolted upright, staring at the floor. There was no space under this bed, just drawers built into the frame. But I still heard it. The whisper came from beneath me, muffled through the wood. I clutched my knees to my chest, whispering, "You're not real? You're not real?" The whisper paused, then replied. "You brought me with you," I screamed. Mom came running, flipping on the light. "What is it?" I couldn't answer. I just pointed at the bed. She checked underneath, of course. Found nothing. She tried to calm me down, rubbing my back, whispering that it was just trauma, just fear. But as she spoke, the lamp on the nightstand flickered. Both of us froze. The light dimmed to a dull orange glow. Then a faint scratching began. Not under the bed this time, but inside the wall. We left the room that night and slept in the living room. None of us mentioned it in the morning. Days passed. Mom tried to act normal. She found us a small rental house near the edge of town. Temporary, she said, until we figured out what to do next. I tried to believe her, to believe it was just some nightmare I was dragging with me. But every night, the same whisper returned. Sometimes faint, sometimes right beside my ear. I started seeing movement and reflections, shadows that shifted when I stood still. Jake stopped sleeping. Mom looked worse every day. One morning, I found her standing in my room, staring at the floor. "Mum," I said softly. She turned to me slowly. Her voice was quiet, flat. I heard it too. That was the moment I realized it wasn't in my head anymore. It was in our lives. We tried everything, sage prayers, even a local pastor. He walked through the house, murmuring scripture under his breath, sprinkling holy water in each corner. When he reached my room, he stopped cold. He turned to Mom and said quietly, "Whatever this is, it's attached to her." He wouldn't say my name. That night, I begged Mom to take me to a hotel. Anywhere but here. But she was exhausted, pale, and distant. "We can't keep running him," she said. "We'll handle it tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. Because that night, it finally showed itself again. It was around 3:07 a.m. The same cursed hour as before. I woke to a soft thump, then another. The bed shook slightly, as if someone was moving beneath it. But there was no space for anything to hide. Then the drawers under the bed began to rattle. Harder and harder until they slid open on their own. The smell of decay flooded the room. I jumped out of bed, my heart slamming in my chest. And from inside the drawers, something began to rise. Not a person. Not even a shape, just a darkness, thick and wreathing, like smoke made solid. Within it, I could see faint outlines of fingers, eyes. A mouth that wasn't really there but smiling anyway. "You can't leave me?" it whispered. Mom rushed in, screaming my name. The door slammed shut behind her, trapping us both. The lights burst, showering glass onto the floor. She grabbed me and pulled me toward the window. But before we could move, something cold wrapped around my ankle. I looked down. There was a hand reaching out of the darkness, gripping me tight. I screamed, kicking and clawing at the air. Mom swung at it, shouting, "Let her go!" It did. The darkness sank back into the floor like it was retreating. The smell faded. The room went still. But as we stood there shaking, we heard one last whisper, so soft it could have been the wind. "You're already mine." We left that night, drove until sunrise, checked into a roadside motel miles away. I don't even remember the drive. I just remember the silence in the car, the sound of the tires on the road, and Mom's hands gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles were white. We never went back. We didn't even take our things. That was months ago. We've moved twice since then. I sleep with the lights on every night. Some nights, I hear nothing. Some nights, I almost convince myself it's over. But every now and then, when the room goes quiet enough, I hear it again. A faint, distant whisper. Coming from the floor. "Emily." And when I do, I keep perfectly still, because I know if I look down, I'll see it waiting, just beneath the bed, smiling up at me, waiting for me to listen again. If you're still here, congratulations. You made it through the night. But remember, sometimes when the house goes quiet, and you swear you hear something breathing beneath you, it's not your mind playing tricks. It's just them, waiting for you to listen again. This was The Whispers Under My Bed, told by Midnight Hunt. If you dare to return, hit subscribe and join me again on the next hunt through the dark. Until then, keep your lights low and your feet off the floor. If you ever hear your name whispered in the dark, don't answer.